Welcome to episode 16 of They Might Be Self-Aware. I am Hunter Powers, joined by
Daniel Bishop.
Hey Daniel, how's it going?
Good. You worry that every time I say that, that's just my voice being cloned somewhere else?
Oh, I cloned your voice a long time ago. I'm just not telling you.
Well, okay.
That said,
we'll talk about that.
Today on the show, Scarlett Johansson's voice is storming off the set at OpenAI.
Speaking of sets, Putin premieres at the Cannes Film Festival. Or does he?
Your boss might just be a deepfake and emptying the company coffers.
Slack, speaking of work, promises that they aren't cloning you.
Mitch McConnell, he's blocking the deepfake legislation.
And you'll never believe this one AI trick to keep the cheese on your pizza.
Oh, it's all up next on
They Might Be Self-Aware.
So we thought attention was all you needed, but apparently Scarlett Johansson is all you need in order to revolutionize everything that is AI. And perhaps Scarlett Johansson is the true self-aware among us.
And it turns out that being all you need doesn't mean all you pay for. You can just steal her voice and hope nobody notices, and then give that voice to millions of people who are bound to immediately notice.
So I low-key thought that OpenAI had a deal with Scarlett Johansson. It just wasn't public. For whatever reason, Scarlett didn't want everyone to know about it. But that's what I thought was going on, because that voice sounded exactly like Scarlett Johansson and specifically tuned from the film Her.
So I wonder if I have voice blindness or something, because I listened to the GPTO voice Sky, which has now been removed.
Sky.
While they're investigating, what happened. Sky in huge quotation marks, despite the fact there's also a tweet from Sam Altman that says her. Like, okay, I didn't see it. I'm the one person who didn't. Everybody else saw it. So I wonder if I just have like voice blindness or something. But right, it was a very nice voice. And I guess once I heard the clips side by side, I said, oh yeah, I guess that is the same thing.
So the story here is that, I guess, Sam really likes the film Her. And by the way, it's a good film. I recommend this film. And he's working on the next version of his voice assistant, which is much more conversational. It was demoed. Now it's like a couple of weeks ago. And he had the idea of making it as close to the film Her as possible, and approached Scarlett Johansson about the possibility of officially licensing her voice. And she was the voice of, I guess we should, in the film Her, it's about, it's Joaquin Phoenix, who is a greeting card writer, if I'm remembering correctly. And he starts having a relationship with his voice assistant, who is voiced by Scarlett Johansson. So Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, approaches Scarlett about the possibility of officially licensing her voice. She declines this gracious offer. And what do you know? The voice comes out and it sounds exactly like Scarlett Johansson.
We talked about this last week with the voice actors whose data had been taken apparently in a murky way, possibly with their approval. They were paid for a job. But in this case, this is a much more blatant. There was nothing signed. This voice was straight up not supposed to be used for this kind of thing. And there it is.
But now it's also, appears to be true. I'm going to give Sam the benefit of the doubt here. It's not Scarlett Johansson. It's some other actress that they hired who happens to sound exactly like Scarlett Johansson. But it's not Scarlett Johansson. He didn't use the 10-second audio sample to clone her voice. He used someone else's voice.
That is entirely possible, and maybe the courts will have to figure this one out as well. But right, there was a whole article that was released. Not an article. Well, yes, an article. Something I think on the OpenAI blog of like, here's how we chose the voices, and we brought in
press release.
Yeah, we brought in people, and it was this 5-month selection process, and we want to make sure that it was a diverse group and that it was.
We read from all different scripts from Scarlett Johansson. It wasn't just the film Her. We auditioned many scenes.
Right. And supposed non-imitation of celebrity voices. They weren't imitating Scarlett's voice. We were using that one person's voice who happened to be selected for naturally sounding just like her. Or maybe not. I don't know. What I do know now, now that I listen to the clips side by side, is that those two voices, Sky and Scarlett Johansson, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Now, that kind of raises the question, at what point is it too much of a likeness, especially for like a voice? That's a problem I'm pretty sure we've not had to deal with as a society legally before.
We have. There's been examples of celebrity impersonators advertising products. So you hire the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice impersonator to do your radio ad for you, talking about, I was about to do a really bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, and I stopped myself. Now I'm really glad. Get to the chopper.
Oh, he did it. I was transported back.
We're going to get sued. So there are cases where people have hired impersonators to advertise their product, and they get sued, and they win in court. Now, if it's absurd or parody, that's covered under free speech. But if you can demonstrate that it's causing commercial harm to Arnold Schwarzenegger because you just had him endorse your McDonald's French fries, even though it wasn't him, but it sounded like him, and an average person from the public would think that Arnold Schwarzenegger just said, eat all the McDonald's French fries you can, then Arnold Schwarzenegger can claim that you've harmed my brand image, and so I'm going to sue McDonald's for harming my brand image. Doesn't matter that they found someone who sounds just like him and it isn't him. It matters that they harmed his brand's image.
Well, is it not that they're saying, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger and I think that you should buy these
say that.
New tires for a low price?
It's that people, when they listen to it, they would assume that this is Arnold Schwarzenegger saying it, and you are harming Arnold Schwarzenegger's brand image.
Okay. Then if there's that sort of precedent, OpenAI is in for more of a rough time with taking stuff that maybe they didn't ask permission for. It's not the first time they've done it, and it apparently won't be the last.
I do think that these laws will inevitably evolve with AI as it becomes sort of more and more true in the concept that, because I don't think the average person knows that you don't necessarily own your own voice. It's an absurd idea. If you happen to sound like this, Arnold, if you happen to sound like Scarlett Johansson, you can't sell your voice. You're not allowed. It's against the law. That feels very wrong, and I think that feels wrong to most people. I think it's far more of an edge case than we give credit to. But I imagine that will evolve over time here as copying these things becomes more and more trivial. Again, there's examples of, or there's questions around, okay, what if someone comes out with an open source version of Scarlett Johansson? Who owns that?
And they start source Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, it's inevitable. Well, we could do it. We could probably do it by the end of this podcast episode if I just get myself like slightly distracted.
We'd break a couple of terms of service depending on what service.
I was going to voice it myself.
Sure. Oh, I thought you meant specifically Scarlett Johansson.
I did. So
I don't want to get sued by Scarlett Johansson's people, so I'm going to stop. Scarlett, I do not endorse. I do not condone this sort of behavior.
So
it's very naughty.
OpenAI they've done a little bit of a mea culpa, but not entirely, and they've removed Scarlett's or Sky's. By the way, did they have to give her a name that started with an S too, and an SK-ish sound? Sky? Like, come on.
You know what that really makes me think of is the other four voices that aren't getting any of this attention. I think OpenAI released a legal alternate reality game where now we have to find the clues and, try and track down who the people that they stole that voice from are. Maybe it wasn't any actors at any point, or, voice actors brought into the studio. It was just stolen audio from some actor somewhere else.
So there is
I think this is a nice game that they've given us, and we should all be playing it.
Quasi-conspiracy theory around this, which is that OpenAI knew exactly what they were doing, and this is a publicity play. That OpenAI is in this position where they're the market leader, but everyone knows that it's just a matter of time until there's equally good competitors and even open source competitors. So they have to figure out some way to continually create enough noise in the market to have enough attention on them in order to keep this tentpole position that they have. And that this is one of the reasons why it often appears Sam Altman is pushing the envelope that it's a little bit for publicity and marketing purposes. So yeah,
we'll release this worth voice. More to them in exposure than Correct. It is the cost of the lawsuit.
Yeah, and they pulled the voice. It's down. They're having an official investigation about whether this actually does sound like Scarlett Johansson or not. Rather than working on GPT-5,
found no wrongdoing.
They've paused GPT-5 until they can get to the bottom of who is Sky. By the way, there's I don't know if you've seen there's rumors I've seen this week GPT-5 coming out in November, and this is fueled a little bit by some things from Microsoft made some comments about OpenAI training GPT-5 on their servers, and I think they said something like if GPT-4 was a shark, the amount of infrastructure we needed. GPT-5 is a blue whale or was something like that, saying it's the amount of infrastructure that they're using to train GPT-5, which they've confirmed is actively being trained right now, is a huge multiple on GPT-4. So rumors coming out in November, also rumors that it will, and I still don't know what I'll finish my sentence, that it will be AGI. Now, you still don't know how I still don't know how we're validating this. Great. Let's just say they do come out and claim it. How do we know?
Yeah, right. We can't agree on what consciousness is for existing creatures. I don't think that we would fully know what AGI is until it's already taken over and doesn't concern itself with those kinds of questions, maybe. But also, I've heard a lot of things about people saying that the transformer architecture at its core is not what leads to AGI. It leads to a really, really good chatbot, but it isn't AGI, and I think that's.
Are you suggesting really attention is not true. All you need?
I don't think it's all you need. I don't know what the subsequent architecture or architectures are that will more closely mimic life, but the ability to actively learn just as you go, as opposed to having to completely stop the thing and take a long time to train on top of it. I think that, and I know I talked about this in previous episodes. I think you have to have some sort of embodiment to be able to interact with the world other than just text on a screen. I don't know why I feel like that's maybe it's less a requirement for the actual AGI and it's more a requirement for the AGI to be able to kind of prove that it can do more than just chat, is to give it the ability to do more than chat. But riddle me this. If you were to take GPT-4
yes,
and you can give it text instructions and it will give you good responses back. If you were to take movements to the wheel of a car and start giving that to GPT-4, would you put your car in charge of it? I know I sure wouldn't. Here's a paragraph of text describing what I see and how far away it is and what direction it is. How much should I hit the accelerator or the brake or turn or whatever? I don't want that. I think but that would be asking for trouble.
The whole AGI angle, or
that's the G though, right? The G is general.
Yes, but there's a lot of general people out there that also would trust to drive my car.
Multimodal isn't just text, it isn't just video, it isn't just audio, it's also arms, it's also I don't know.
I think here's my litmus test. If it can substantially improve itself, it can self-replicate to some degree. If GPT-5 is able to create GPT-6, which is substantially better than GPT-5, in less time than it took us to create GPT-6, if it can beat us to the punch and build something that's much better, then I feel my intellectual curiosities are tickled, and I may be willing to consider it AGI.
I think, honestly, that might be a little harder to prove than you might originally think, because we've already talked about how AI works can't be copyrighted.
It's one of them.
Yeah. We also have some new news out that you can't, at least in Tokyo or Japan,
yes,
you can't patent something that an AI
Well, it's also true in the United States, but I guess it's recently made it to Tokyo as well.
So it's becoming international that an AI isn't even allowed. We're talking about, is an AI creative? And then the courts are saying they're not allowed to be creative, or at least you're not able to patent it. And then
they're allowed to be creative. They're not allowed to have ownership of that which they create, because they're not beings.
I don't know if either of us know enough about the legal system to answer this, but I wonder if an AI outputs, here's schematics for some sort of, basically like here's a patent set of diagrams or whatever, or writes an article or whatever. does that mean that nobody can own it, or does it mean the AI can't, but whoever was running the hardware at the time that it spat that out gets it?
No one can own it. However, proving this is non-trivial, right? So the AI outputs the patent. The courts have said the AI cannot get a patent on that, and you can't just claim it as your own because it's not yours. You weren't the inventor. And at this point, if you're like, okay, but at this point, it also constitutes prior art. So I can't use it as inspiration for my own patent. I can reference it and say, here's prior art, and I can invent on top of it. That said, who's to say that AI generated it? Prove it.
Right. I deleted my chat logs after and never bothered talking about my GPT-4 discussions while making that patent. Yeah.
And you take the output from GPT and modify it and tweak it and add some of your own things, and then you do start to own the copyright. If it was just sort of an inspiration, I mean, there's a slippery slope line, but the people that have been testing this have been trying to they're literally listing an AI model as the inventor. It's not people that are trying to list themselves as the inventor and saying, hey, I leveraged AI as part of creation. They're trying to get the patent assigned to this.
Right. Email, the U.S. PTO, Patent and Trade Office, gets an email from the AI at OpenAI.com. Subject line, I made a thing. Message. Here's the. I'm sure that's what you do, is you just email the patent office and say, I came up with an idea. Please give me a patent. I'm positive that's how it works. You're saying that the people who review all of the patent applications would say, no, you're an AI, you don't get it. But if it was a person and they just happened to have used a bunch of AI to make it in the first place,
if they disclose that I didn't actually write any of this, I'm just putting my name on it, then it would get denied. But if they didn't do that, I mean, it's just like there's been a whole bunch of research papers that have been published that it then is quickly revealed that they didn't actually write. It's just plagiarism, copying the output from some GPT model.
Well, if a GPT-5 is allegedly of an intelligence, both depth and breadth, that we might start wondering about, is this AGI, or is it at least, again, I don't think that we need that 100% of 100% cases. Maybe it's enough where you could say, it's a person, but it isn't something that I would, like on a driver's license. If you have glasses, you have to wear your glasses when you drive. If you're an AI that hasn't passed whatever set of driving tests, you're not allowed to drive. If you can't do this, you can't do that. So maybe we start with, okay, you've expressed the ability to be creative and invent these kinds of things. You are a person, and then you get certain kinds of things unlocked in terms of legal rights. I don't know. That feels like it has some not great historical precedents, as well as it's just this entirely new framework that I think we're going to have to figure something out. Once you look at the output of this AI and you're like, look, it's got to be considered a person at this point, then we really have to wonder about, does it count as killing someone if you turn it off? Is it this? Yeah. Is it that?
There is precedent here, which is in the United States, at least, businesses are allowed to be considered pretty close to a human and have a lot of the rights that a human has. And it's not a big leap to go from a business. What's the difference between a business and an AI model? And
especially if that AI model incorporates itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it just gets treated as a business, which then gets a lot of those rights and is separated from the people that are working there. And
because a business doesn't get a driver's license, for example. So, that's a really interesting thought. Maybe the more capable AI models will have to basically become either businesses or something like that themselves. A legal entity, shall we say, themselves.
More Delaware Corps. Great.
The population of Delaware is going to be more AI than people by the year 2030. Let's go ahead and put that on the calendar, see if I ended up being right.
Back to ScarJo. Is that the nickname?
Yeah, that's her.
Is that her
celebrity singleton name?
Yeah.
Instead of the couple. All right.
So one nuance
I immediately gave up on that.
That I don't know that everyone understands, and I don't even know that I understand it now that I say it out loud, is So if they had done a public figure like Donald Trump or Joe Biden's voice, Joe Biden or Donald Trump could not sue them because we are allowed to use their they don't own the rights to their voices and their image because they are considered public figures. So there's this.
Is Scarlett Johansson not a public figure?
No, she is a private figure. She does not work for the public.
If you work for the public sector in general, then if I worked at an NGO.
Potentially. Again, we'll have to ask our AI lawyer to explain the subtleties of this. But where I was getting at is this. So Cannes, the film festival, is going on right now in France, and there's a film there starring Putin, except it's not actually Putin.
Right.
They've just, it's a quote unquote deep fake where they've put actual Putin's face on top of an actor, and supposedly it's quite a compelling representation of Putin, but there's no legal issues with this. Not to mention, I don't know. I think probably
all
the
sanctions person, and what's he gonna do?
Exactly.
Come over to France and hey, you shouldn't have.
Hey. But yeah, so just another example of the technology exists, and so at some point it's just going to become so trivial to deep fake anyone. I'll use that term, even though I don't know that I really like it. That I think all this will just become moot.
We get into that post-truth society where you can't trust any video.
Sure, when within 10 seconds I can take Scarlett Johansson's face and put it on any other body in any other media.
Film. They should just do the same film with different public figures over the face.
Swap her voice in and out in just 10 seconds. And I can do that to anyone. Then I think that these laws go away. I have this thing that I like to say, which is that the technology will set us free. And that in general, I don't worry about increased legislation because increased legislation often leads to innovation. Great. Paint us into a corner. We're going to figure out the technology around it. Great. You want to make all these stupid laws and cracks down. Actually, you can think of it as a driving force behind innovation because we'll just break out of it. We'll figure out a way to create something that's entirely encrypted, that no one can track, that can do everything in 10 seconds, that you can't trace back to anyone, and make it, a moot point. So I don't know that I'm really concerned. But as this technology becomes more and more prevalent, we're going to see it used more, and we're going to see it used more for nefarious purposes. I think you pointed out this article. There was a UK engineering firm where someone deepfaked one of their execs and got them to transfer, it was like 20 million probably pounds. Euros,
quid,
one of those
not
currencies.
Euro. It was pounds sterling. Is that like the what is the UK versus the British versus England debate? Like are quid and pounds, is a pound sterling slightly different? I don't know. We need to get a Brit to tell us. I'm very ignorant of that sort of thing, but I do see it looks like an L with kind of a hat and a line through it, and that's all I know before the number.
There were 20 million of them.
20 million of that. It's speaking of not really knowing, Arup, ARUP is the name of the firm. They're an engineering firm. They do engineering. And they got duped. Arup, that's a bit of a stretch. They got duped $20 million through not just one, but like a series of calls where people were on video calls pretending to be somebody else. Eventually, all the things get signed. Off goes the $20 million, and then they disappear.
This scam, though, has been going on for a very long time. This is just a slightly more modern version of it. I've had, I think, maybe the last 2 companies that I've worked at, I've had the CEO reach out to me and want some money for something.
Yeah. Usually via like a bad text. Hello, it is me, CEO of company.
That's the one I got most recently was I got a text message from a number I didn't know. Hey, Hunter, this is insert CEO's name. I just got a new phone. And I hadn't talked to the CEO in maybe like 2 to 3 years, something like that.
Right.
And so it was believable to me that they had a new phone. And also, they were in a position of power. So like I respond back pretty, oh, hi, CEO. How are you doing? It's been a long time. Things good? They're like, yeah, things are good. I'm just in a little bit of a pickle here. If you could help me out with something. And again, I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. What is it you need? And then it was, I just need some Google Store gift cards for this client that I'm trying to close, and I'm in the meeting and I can't get them right now. If you
have to act now.
Yes, purchase them. So I instantly know. But up until that point, I didn't even think maybe this is a scammer. It was completely believable to me. And I was like, oh, it's a scam.
You need to buy a bunch of Bitcoin and send it to this address. That seems like a perfectly reasonable ask for my CEO. Click.
And so now, as we can create a video clone and add some pixelation on it and appear on a FaceTime call and clone their voice, it certainly becomes, I understand it becomes more believable, but this is a scam that's existed for forever.
Sure, people have been scammed as long as there's been money, but it's getting a lot more sophisticated, and this kind of thing is going to happen a lot more. This might be the first or one of the first companies to fall victim to something in this more modern age like that, or maybe this is just the biggest headline, largest amount of money taken or something. But I think like ransomware attacks, like other phishing-based attacks, we're going to see a lot of this in the future.
I think you've said before that you have like a secret code word with your family or something to...
Everybody should,
to validate.
A code word or a code phrase or something that you can bring up with your family, figure it out offline. Don't have it stored anywhere online. And that way, you call up your grandma, and grandma needs to be like, all right, Sonny, what's your favorite vegetable? And then you have to say that it's the Porsche Cayenne or something like that. Hi, it was. Okay, great, it's you. Obviously, not something that... It can't be one of those, what is your favorite color, or what was your childhood favorite,
your high school
the name
mascot.
of your... Yeah, exactly right. It can't be one of those things where it's like, it's one of 10 answers. It's got to be something pretty unique. I really think that that's something that a surprising number of us are going to run into in our lives at least once, is a phone or video call from someone who is someone else, that like, oh, it's me, your significant other, and I'm in trouble and I sound just like her or him or whatever. I need this thing now. I got into a car wreck and I can't find my wallet. What's our credit card number again?
Yeah, there's a lot of these scams. Another one that targets parents where they call up. It's a garbled version of one of their kids' voices. It's not an AI deepfake. It's just again, generic male or generic female voice, but garbled up and with a lot of distortion on it. And then the scammer, in theory, takes the phone from them, like, I've kidnapped your daughter or your son. You need to transfer $10,000 in the next 30 minutes or they're dead. Otherwise, there you can go back, and it's all just fake. But those types of experiences will be much easier because they'll just go to TikTok, if it still exists, and clone their actual child's, I guess, entire likeness. Their voice, their physical appearance, and their dancing abilities. And
I can see why a lot of parents say, maybe I won't have any digital presents for my kid.
Yeah. It's the future will be interesting. And may it be a good interesting.
So I have thousands of pictures of my kid.
Yeah.
A lot of pictures. They're in Google Photos. I have extremely little other out there information. I feel pretty good about that online presence, but if Google Photos ever gets hacked, I was part of one of those, your social security number and fingerprints and everywhere you've lived and everyone you've ever known. Like, I had to go through a clearance thing years and years ago. And then the Office of Personnel Management got hacked, or, some large amount of data got leaked. I hadn't misused any of that data. From the source, it got taken. And then there's the Experian or whoever it was hack. And then like 5 other ones like that. If Google Photos ever goes, I could have been as careful as I wanted. And then all of the likenesses are still going to be able to be mined out of that. So here's hoping that they keep their IT game very, very strong.
Yes. And I think we're moving towards a future where I don't need access to your thousands and thousands of photographs. I just need one photograph.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've seen some of the demos of that.
Yeah.
I think that's not really the future so much as already here. But fortunately, the US is acting quickly and decisively to ban use of AI, of these deepfakes, for things like influencing elections, right?
No,
right,
not really
Hunter?
is the answer. The answer is no.
Uh-oh. So what are we doing or not doing then along those lines?
The social networks where this information mostly gets shared do have rules around labeling the material, which in effect, you're like, well, what do you mean labeling it? That's stupid. That doesn't do anything. And they just won't put a label on it. But it does give them the means to take it down if they believe something was created. They need a reason and a rule that they can train their systems and their personnel on for how can we take down media that is suspicious. And they now have these rules in place. In theory, they have increased scrutiny or increased personnel, resources watching over this during the elections. It doesn't tend to reflect well upon the platforms when this material is everywhere. They get a lot of public and regulatory scrutiny that they don't want.
Right.
But, there's I think it's hard to define where the line is drawn. I mean,
this
I guess
comes back to it's porn if I think it is a legal debate from years ago. Oh. I'll know it when I see it. There's obvious blatant cases, like here is President Biden advocating for eating 12 babies a day to stay healthy. Like, okay, sure, maybe that one was probably not actually something he said, but then you could have Trump, I don't know, pronounce words right. And is that like a misleading use of AI?
Well, that's the thing, right? So first you have both candidates are already editing their own ads to put themselves in the best light, and there's a little Photoshopping going on. And, some wrinkles getting cleared out, and so all right, so that's not it. And what definitely is it when they're created entirely, when video is created entirely out of thin air? That's a deep fake. Again, whether used for good or bad. But okay.
Is the Putin film at Cannes right now, is a deep fake where it's just the face on top of a human actor, for example?
I think that's a deep fake.
Where's the line? So,
you changed two words in a speech. Is that a deep fake?
Right. So the headline is McConnell, as in Mitch McConnell, opposes bill to ban use of deceptive AI to influence elections. And the kind of knee-jerk reaction I have is like, how could you possibly be against that? I personally don't enjoy agreeing with that man on almost anything. But here's a quote from him. So he argued that if his colleagues on the rules panel viewed a dozen political ads, they would, quote, would differ on which ones were intentionally misleading, end quote. I absolutely agree with that. And this doesn't even need AI. We super don't need AI to say what political ad is misleading. You lock some people in a room and they're going to come out with twice as many opinions as there were people that went there. So I get it. I do understand from a point of view that you would say, I haven't read the actual proposed legislation. But if you were to say you can't use any AI, any ML whatsoever, again, I don't know if that's what the actual bill says. I think we're probably trying to think of generative AI, deep fakes, people saying stuff more or less whole cloth. But this is something that's really hard to define. Where is the line? What was too much?
All political ads have to be shot on film and no
35 millimeter film, unedited. You have to just release the raw footage. That's it.
I did hear a thing. This was a while ago, so I don't know if it's still true at all. But it was that in fashion, when models are auditioning, they'll go around and try on the clothes and show them their portfolio, but that they switched from taking digital images to taking Polaroids of all of the models. Because as you might imagine, the models are all heavily manipulating their images, using all these tools. So the casting agencies want Polaroids of all the models so that they can say, okay, this is what this person actually looks like. So
that's really interesting. Yeah.
We need the Polaroid of our political figures, which is probably a 35 millimeter film. We're going to go back to film. You thought it was gone.
Well, you need a source of truth somewhere, right? And maybe, eschew the digital and embrace the physical.
Here's a crazy one for you that perhaps there's someone out there right now working on a deep fake of you. I don't know. Have you ever used Slack? And this is a trick question because I know the answer. But have you ever used Slack?
I have, Hunter. Have you?
Yes. The last, I don't know how long it's been now. Probably like it's close to 10 years that Slack's been around. I was using it since the very beginning. So, and if someone doesn't know what Slack is, it's a very popular workplace chat software that the companies install so that their employees can efficiently communicate with each other. And as companies are increasingly going remote, it's taking a larger and larger role in daily company operations, where perhaps even a majority of the communication is happening over this chat platform. Unbeknownst to its users, they're making their own GPT model, which makes sense. However, they're training on all of their users' business conversations and doing so idea. More or less without telling them. Technically, they hit it in terms of service, and technically you could opt out, but it seems like no one caught this before they were already doing it.
Yeah, and
because there were no articles about it.
As soon as they ingested everything the one time, we could change it going forward, but it's already all been slurped up. And even if people saw it coming and immediately abandoned ship, they've got way too much momentum. Like, it's just, this problem was destined to become a problem, I think. This is also extremely, extremely ill-advised. I've seen a lot of private secrets. Keys, a lot of corporates. I mean, like, it's in Slack. This is our internal place where none of this shit. If they train something on this and it becomes like widely available, it's absolutely going to end up spitting out like verbatim chunks of text. We've seen this kind of thing where, like, with the right prompts, you can get it to spit out some of its training data. That will happen. You're going to see like private keys to people's repositories, or, you know, here's a copy of the rough draft of the email that we're going to send to that Senate subcommittee, and I hope nobody notices this ever.
Now, in Slack's defense, they've suggested that they're aware of all of those potential issues, and they've put safeguards in place ahead of time. Like, they thought through this, and any, we'll call it like PII type of information and confidential secrets, they are obfuscating such that you would never, it would never be able to be traced back to anyone, and they would never actually reveal any of this information. But there's too much history. We know that never actually works.
Slack has platform-level machine learning models for things like channel and emoji recommendations and search results. We do not build or train these models in such a way that they could learn, memorize, or be able to reproduce some part of customer data, a company spokesperson told TechCrunch.
I can't wait for their how we train our models press release.
Yeah, what's the Anchorman quote that he like takes out a cigarette? I don't believe you. I do absolutely believe that you could have a machine learning model that, like, given all of this, here's a recommendation of the channel that you'd want to go to next, or the emoji that you'd respond to that with. I don't think it's going to stop at just those. Also, things like that. Like, okay, I realize a company spokesperson isn't going to say, and here's our entire roadmap, and this is every single ML model that we're making and how it's going to be used. But I don't know. I don't trust at all the statement that we do not build or train these models in such a way they can learn, memorize, or be able to reproduce some part of customer data. And if they don't now, maybe they will soon. As soon as Slack says, well, the hubbub died down about that article back in May 2024, we could make a generative AI model, right?
Yeah, I think this brings out an interesting point of, when do the AI integrations become too much? There was another example of this week with iTerm. Are you familiar with iTerm? Maybe you use iTerm? Okay, iTerm is a very popular terminal application on. It's probably multi-platform. I use it primarily on Mac. I would say that the majority of engineers do not use the native terminal application on their Macs. They download a different one, and the one that they download more than any other is iTerm. And
I use ZSH for what it's worth.
Yes, so that's your shell which runs in your terminal, and so you can.
This is just like an actual terminal.
Yes.
Why does that matter?
There's lots of cool features. One of these new features with the release this week is it has an AI integration where you can pop in your OpenAI API key and talk in plain text. So the terminal is, for those of you who may not know, I guess kind of like a way of talking directly to the computer and issuing commands directly to the computer without any graphical interface. It's all text based. And these commands that you issue, they are often non-intuitive, and like can take a substantial amount of time to really understand the language of navigating and interacting with your computer via the terminal. But there is a lot of power there. You can often do things faster. You can often do things that are blocked elsewhere in the system by just interacting directly on the terminal. And so anyways, this new release this week, they integrated with OpenAI, and so you can pop in your key and you can say in plain text that what you're trying to do, and it will then convert that into the correct terminal command. But a lot of people use a lot of secret information in their terminal. Lots of encryption keys and things of that nature are leveraged in the terminal, and the community became very concerned that now there's this ability to essentially spy on everything that I'm typing in the terminal, even though, according to iTerm, look, it's only when you say send this to OpenAI do we send it out. But just having its presence there made a lot of people feel uneasy. Now, I've had a terminal integration with OpenAI for quite some time now through some scripts and some hacks where I can, again, type in something in plain language. I think I hit Control L and it converts it into the appropriate command. It works incredibly well. But
very cool.
I guess I opted into that, and now a lot of other people have to opt out of that functionality, being within their application where they're dealing with sensitive information. But also, just again, brings to light, should there be large language models in everything? I guess that's a topic that you've touched on more than a few times. Right. Over
the business world says yes, it should be in everything. Every last thing should have a large language model in it or have access to one. But I think we're seeing some fairly obvious use cases like the terminal, and help you out with a lot of like weird arcane commands to make that better. Users of that, or the way that's implemented, not rubbing people the right way.
I wonder how much of it is just that it's not running locally. It's
not running locally, so you're having to send the information, encrypted as it may be, but then also that information allegedly is not being used to train anything, but you don't really know for sure. And so that, I think, is why there's this whole community around local large language models. People being able to take a Llama 3, for example, plop that into their computer, turn off the internet connection, and have a large language model and its capabilities without having to touch anything else anywhere else. I like that kind of thing. I feel like I'd probably be one of the kind of people to opt in or not opt out of an iTerm type experience where OpenAI is now in it and you can give it the API key. Cool, I'll give it my API key, no big deal. I think that's a really, and then I'd look through, oh good, they're not going to train off of my data. And I would trust that. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily trust that, but I bet a lot of the people who wouldn't trust that company to use the data for training data or whatever, even though they said they wouldn't, I bet a lot of those people would use a local large language model for that. And I've seen that online. People saying, hey, I got a coding assistant using Llama 3. Here it is working. Ooh, very cool.
Would you use a Mistral 7B version 0.3? That's what people really want to know.
Yeah, I've used Mistral before, both the 0.1 and the 0.2. I saw this was extremely recently. The 0.3 release came out. It is, I haven't tried it yet because there's a million. They're just constantly coming out. I cannot try all of the new models that are coming out. I'm very excited for this one, though. It didn't seem from the changelog that this was like a particularly new model or like a fully new trained thing. The big change was the change in vocabulary size, because all of these models aren't looking at individual words as much as it might seem that they are. They're using subword tokens or characters or something like that. But having a larger number of those that it splits things into means that it's probably extracting a smidge more information. about what each of those subword tokens or words or characters or whatever end up being. So it's probably smarter in some way. It's going to take time to determine if this hits the leaderboards at a higher level or something. But it sounded like it wasn't really a new model, just a like basically the same smarts, but with a bigger set of how it looks at the world. I don't know.
Did you catch the bullet on the model about an uncensored fine tuning
for Mistral? No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, and I haven't run it yet either, but there are other news sources reporting that this version of Mistral is uncensored. And again, there is a bullet in there about it having an uncensored fine tuning, which that is how you uncensor these models, is by fine tuning them. I think that would be really,
lobotomizing them. I think we talked about that previously.
That would be really interesting. And no one's really yet taken the tentpole position. Well, I guess I'll finish this sentence. No one's really taken the tentpole position yet of, we only do uncensored models. Like, we're not going to put any of the protection in there. There of course is a best uncensored model, but there's no large company like a Mistral saying, hey, right, our models are uncensored by default.
Well, that's how you end up with the extra racist information or stuff that could land them in other legal hot water, like we didn't do any filtering for how to make chemical weapons or something like that, which is those kinds of discussions are things that the government is looking more into. Should we try to force these to not be able to help in those kinds of ways, which I think is ultimately not going to work. But yeah, uncensored, truly, a lot of people online, mostly for those who want to do erotic role play with their chatbots, are really opposed to any censorship whatsoever. They're worried it's not going to talk dirty to them. But any censorship at all in the data would include things like removing junk data. That's technically censoring some amount. You're taking out information from the entirety of the information that the model could have been trained on. You do have to pick and choose. I've done data cleaning before. A bunch of stuff is just garbage and unusable and would lead to a worse model. Of course, what people mean for censoring is they took out the naughty words, or they took out my ability to recreate the effects of the anarchist cookbook or something along those lines. So, sure. And then people can fine-tune models to make them weirder or add in those capabilities.
I think there is another ask in the uncensored world, although, as I think through it, challenging to completely articulate, but it's that I want the raw answer. Like, when I prompt the model, I don't want the polished, version where you're trying to make a very pretty response. Just tell me the facts exactly as I asked for. There's too much interpretation going on about, well, you asked for this. I'm going to guess that you probably want something like this. I'm going to try to be a helpful assistant and respond in the way that a helpful assistant would respond. No, just do exactly what I say.
So that's a lot closer to a base model, and base models have been released. So this might be what you were talking about. Basically, Mistral released, I think, 2 versions of the model. There's Mistral 7B-V0.3.
Great name, by
and Mistral 7B V03 Instruct. The Instruct means that it was fine-tuned with like sets of instructions. If someone asks this is a good kind of response. If someone asks this is a good kind of response, times millions, times however many. A base model is just, it basically learned how people talk from the internet, from all of its training data. So if you want a model that says, just give me the facts, you want a fine-tune on top of a base model that cuts out all the cruft and just returns responses. And that can be done, and probably has been done, depending on what specific fine-tune you're looking at.
I want to know when you change the answer because the original answer was too naughty. For whatever reason, you think it was too naughty. You changed a few words because you felt that they might be too confrontational.
But it's not changing a few words. It's based on all of those pairs that it's been given. It makes text like that. Now, that's... it's like coming up with whole cloth the edited answer in the first place, as opposed to thinking of an answer and then editing it. But the effect is the same, right?
I suppose.
Yeah. So all you want is and there are uncensored models out there, usually with a very specific kind of use case in mind. But there are others that the idea has been it's instruct tuned, and it is instruct tuned to not say no to whatever you ask it.
No,
but go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay. A legitimate, or what I believe is a legitimate use case, which I often find myself getting censored on and have to go to uncensored models, is when I'm looking at stories and news and trying to find the inflection points and where's the controversy and where do we push things over the edge. The common popular GPT models don't like answering these questions.
Yep.
Anthropic is probably the worst. Claude will just like all the time say, oh, I don't want to paint anyone in a negative light. Let's not focus on the bad parts. It's that stuff that then I find myself going to the uncensored models. Yep. And again, because I'm wanting something that for me resonates closer to the truth than this whitewashed version that's being presented.
Right. So you can either
keep your role
model to not do that, and you can do role play or whatever else. But also, and I might have talked about this last week, somebody has figured out that there is a part of the actual system, the whole neural network, there's basically one little node somewhere where if you just pop that out, it forgets how to say no. And like able to track that down, here's the code, you can do this to any model, which takes a lot of the legal problems of like, you have to make sure that the model can't do that. The problem is already moot because you could take something that's been very tuned to never say anything naughty and then just tell it, you're not allowed to say no to my response. And supposedly it doesn't lose basically any of its smarts, and it does a way better job of just answering the question without even having to be tuned to specifically answer the question all the time. You just tell it effectively, now you can't say no to my request. Don't tell me I don't want to watch this. Don't tell me let's focus on something else. Just I ask you a question and you give me an answer, which is very, very interesting, and has a lot of problems for the future from like your legal and ethical and moral and whatever perspectives of what if you can't get a increasingly powerful model to be allowed to say no.
So it's a wild world that we live in. Yeah, I'm sure one of the reasons why Scarlett Johansson wanted her voice taken down was there were lots of people online that were jailbreaking ChatGPT or GPT-4o and having some of those role-playing conversations you are referencing with Scarlett Johansson and posting the audio online. But I don't know. It's something that just kind of, it feels inevitable. And like we go through these transitions in society where I feel like there's times where we already know the outcome, but we're going to go through all this rigmarole and pretend like it's not going to happen and pretend like, we can't, this is going to hurt everything. Where if we just like go ahead and embrace it because it's inevitable. If we can all agree that 50 years from now, this will all exist. Yeah. So why don't we just hop to the legislation and regulatory frameworks and state of society that we know will exist in 50 years rather than try to prevent it now? Let's
outlaw political theater and scoring points and votes in the meantime, maybe. I mean, that's a really cynical way of looking at it. But also, a bunch of this is there aren't easy answers to a lot of those questions, and it's going to take a tremendous amount of back and forth to come to anything even close to a consensus. Unless we just ask the AGI GPT-5, what is the answer, and it'll just write the legislature for us, because that's not copywritten and it's not a patent. We'll just have it write the laws for us instead. And I think that's a beautiful solution.
The positive angle, and also that it is a transition, and there needs to be a change management process to get us from here to there. And what just boils me is when we pretend like this isn't inevitable. And I feel like if we could just deal with it from that vantage, we know this is going to happen. Now that we know this is going to happen, let's chart how we want to adjust our society given this new inevitable reality. Versus we kind of pretend because it doesn't exist today, it may never exist.
I mean, a couple of years ago, we would have all been pretty sure something like this wouldn't exist.
Not me.
You've always been looking to the future. It's right around the corner. Well, I guess not a couple of years now, because ChatGPT has been around for more than 2 years. No. Yes? It was released in 22.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Maybe ChatGPT, but I was using...
GPT-2 has been around for a while longer.
Yes.
November 30th is when ChatGPT launched. I feel like that is going to be the point that a lot of people look to and say, and that's when it really took off, because it existed before then, but ChatGPT is really the thing that...
I was using it for writing in work before ChatGPT existed.
I'm not the tiniest bit surprised. So we've talked a lot about OpenAI this episode. I want to talk a little bit about Google. Have you noticed at the top of searches now, it'll just pop in a generative AI overview like, oh, you're searching for this. Here's some bullet points about that thing that you searched.
You know, I kind of hate going to Google now, and I try to think of like any reason to not go to Google, like what other way.
Right.
I remember when Google launched. I remember the search engines before Google.
Old man yells at cloud.
Yeah, and I remember how wonderful Google was, and it really was wonderful. And one of the big reasons it caught on was because it was such a simple interface. It was so clean. It was just that search
empty
box
page,
in the middle.
search bar.
Yes.
Here's links to
Fast
the things
results.
that is. Yeah.
Links, and they were good links. And that's why it became this huge, one of the biggest companies in the world. Yep. And it deserved it. But I don't think it deserves it anymore. Not the search engine. It's a painful experience, and I guess now my beloved AI is ruining it even more.
Yeah. Well, so I've seen some of these generative AI answers. For the most part, I ignore them, and I'm just looking for the web page that's related to the thing, and having an increasingly hard time finding those web pages. But that's neither here nor there. We've talked about hallucinations from these kinds of things, from large language models. A hallucination is basically the model knows it's supposed to put something out, and text like this should probably be something that the person would like, but it ends up writing something that is factually incorrect. That kind of thing happens. The hallucinations, I feel like maybe it's just the way that they've been tuned to talk about things, but I don't feel like hallucinations have been as big of a problem in the last 6 months to a year. Like, the problem's getting a little bit better, but it definitely hasn't gone away. All of this to say, did you see the thing about someone having searched for cheese not sticking to pizza?
Yes, this is a problem I sometimes have, and I would be the type of person to Google, how do I get my cheese to stick properly to my pizza?
I'm making pizza. I don't want everything to slide off.
And Google has the answer for you.
Yeah, oops. I said, hopefully no one's listening on their devices, but excuse me, Google. How can I get my cheese to not stick to pizza? AI overview. I'm reading this from a tweet right now. Cheese can slide off pizza for a number of reasons, including too much sauce, too much cheese, or thickened sauce. I'd agree with that. Here are some things you can try. Mix in sauce into the cheese to add moisture to the cheese and dry out the sauce. You can also add about 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to give it more tackiness.
I haven't tried that.
Oh my God.
But that's not a hallucination, is it?
This is the thing. It's not hallucinating that text. By the way, I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm saying it didn't come up with that on its own. That came from a Reddit thread, almost verbatim, from like 11 years ago or something. That's not great. And this is the kind of thing where if people blindly trust AI, they will try. Somebody is going to try something like that. It wasn't this time, but something like that will get tried. This is you can charge your phone faster by putting it in the microwave. Oh, you can do this. Put Mentos and Coke to give it a slightly extra buzzy flavor.
Right.
Whatever the hell.
I guess the two problems here are, one, the way that they're presenting it, you think that it's coming from the authority of Google. Google has now said that, hey, mix some glue in with your cheese and it'll stick better to your pizza.
It's literally up top and center.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if they said, here are some things that people have said on the internet, which is actually what it is, then you have the appropriate context. And yeah, some people have said mix glue. And so then you have the second problem, which is these aren't very good search results to begin with. why are you weighting this comment from a Reddit post?
That's in the top bullet point of the thing that's at the top of your search results is, I mean, you could add glue. Yeah, I don't think that problem is going to be able to be gotten away from entirely, because if you train on all of the data from the internet in the first place, you're going to learn all of the wrong stuff that people have been saying. I've spent some time on Reddit, and let me tell you, people can be pretty wrong about a lot. There's one time pretty recently that I was able to actually butt in and be like, oh, I know the actual answer to this. People were talking about scuba diving and like just having literally no idea what would happen if you were to go up from, it was like a free diver went down and then how did he get back up? Oh no, he couldn't have done this because his lungs would have exploded. I'm like, no, I've scuba dived before. I am PADI and NAUI certified. This is how this would work. And
why both
some people were like,
that's why PADI and NAUI?
I was PADI certified,
yeah,
and then there was a college class for NAUI certification, and I needed a general ed credit, and the final exam for that was go to the Florida Keys and go scuba diving. So I did that.
Makes sense.
It was awesome, except for one of the practice dives where I almost had a catastrophic failure of my equipment. But that's a story for another day. There's no AI in it, so we'll probably not talk about it here.
I guess folks will have to
I did have to be self-aware. Hold on. There we go. I had to be self-aware of my equipment in order to not die underwater. So there's that. Mm-hmm.
Just to mix some glue with it, I guess. And
Yep. I took some mozzarella glue mixture, paste, and put it on the regulator, and then I was fine.
And when you're all done, it was a great snack. These hard-hitting stories and the evolving landscape of AI, we will continue to dive in on and examine and discuss what will be our inevitable future right here on They Might Be Self-Aware. This has been episode 16. And if you are not subscribed still, then you need to glue your finger to that subscribe button. We're in the process of getting Google to officially say that that's how you do it.
So it doesn't slide off.
It doesn't slide off. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. And we certainly would enjoy if you left a like or a dislike and a comment, just feedback. We'll be happy to address it here on the show.
Much like AI, we can learn from comments and results. Yeah.
And we'll be back again next week. But until then, I am Hunter Powers and joined by
Daniel Bishop.
Until next time.
Until next time.
They might be self-aware.